the fierce warriors of the Pacific, the untold power of the Maori. Far away in the vast blue cradle of the South Pacific lies a land of ancient forests, towering volcanoes and mystical fogs that drift endlessly through green mountain valleys. This land is Aotearoa, now known as New Zealand, and it is home to one of the most fearsome and legendary warrior cultures the world has ever known, the Maori. Long before the arrival of European settlers, the Maori had already carved their mark into the soul of these islands with stone, fire, and blood. Their lives were governed not only by survival, but by mana, a sacred force of prestige and power, and by tapu, a strict code of spiritual conduct that elevated warfare into something sacred, something divine. The Maori were Polynesian seafarers who arrived in New Zealand over 1,000 years ago, after journeying thousands of kilometers across the Pacific Ocean in double-hulled canoes, navigating only by the stars, the winds, and the whispers of the sea. When they reached the fertile, untamed lands of Aotearoa, they encountered a place unlike any other, rugged, unpredictable, and full of life. Here, they did not merely settle, they transformed. Isolated from the rest of Polynesia, the Maori evolved into a society centered around tribal unity, ritual, and the art of war. Every tool they crafted, every song they sang, and every tattoo they wore carried meaning, memory, and mana. In this world, warfare was not an act of cruelty, it was a sacred duty. The Maori didn't fight for gold or glory, they fought for honor, revenge, and territory. Deeply personal reasons that connected the living with the spirits of the dead. Every warrior was trained not just physically, but spiritually. They learned the names of their ancestors, the legends of their gods, and the correct chants to strengthen their resolve in battle. And when the time came to fight, they did so with terrifying precision. Their weapons, such as the taiaha, a carved wooden spear staff, and the mere punamu, a short club made of greenstone, were more than tools. They were extensions of the warrior's soul, designed to strike not just the body but the mana of the opponent. Before every battle, the warriors would perform the haka, a thunderous war dance that was both a ritual and a psychological assault. With bulging eyes, beating chests, and feet that struck the earth like war drums, they would proclaim their readiness for death and their hunger for victory. For enemies facing the haka, it was more than a performance. It was a chilling reminder that the Maori were not afraid to kill, nor afraid to die. The haka called forth the spirits of ancestors, summoned the gods, and transformed men into living weapons of spiritual energy. The art of combat extended beyond the battlefield. The Maori were brilliant engineers who constructed massive pai, fortified villages built on hills with layered palisades, trenches, and cleverly designed kill zones. These structures were so advanced that, during the New Zealand Wars in the 19th century, British military commanders, some of whom had fought in wars across the empire, were stunned by their tactical complexity. The Maori had developed guerrilla strategies, siege defenses, and ambush tactics that confounded professional armies. They used terrain to their advantage, moved silently through dense forests, and struck swiftly before vanishing into the land they knew better than any outsider ever could. Tribal warfare among the Maori was common, and battles were often brutal and deeply personal. Conflicts could be sparked by land disputes, insults to mana, or long-standing utu, a sacred tradition of vengeance and balance. When a chief was insulted or a family member slain, retaliation was inevitable. It could come days later, or decades. The Maori did not forget. In fact, revenge was seen as a moral obligation, a necessary act to restore spiritual harmony. Victories were not merely celebrated, they were immortalized. The heads of slain enemies were often preserved through a meticulous process and displayed as trophies of both triumph and spiritual power. As the centuries passed, the Maori continued to dominate their lands with pride and autonomy, until the arrival of European colonizers in the 18th and 19th centuries brought muskets, Christianity, and the beginning of a new era. The Maori adapted quickly to firearms, engaging in a brutal period known as the Musket Wars. where the traditional hand-to-hand style of combat gave way to long-distance death and mass destruction. The battles were even more devastating, and entire iwi tribes were wiped out or scattered. Despite the new technology, the essence of Maori warfare remained unchanged. Every shot, every ambush, every sacrifice was made in the name of mana and ancestral pride. Resistance to colonial rule was fierce. Warriors like Hon Heke, Te Kooti, and Rewi Maniapoto led revolts against British forces, employing clever tactics that forced even seasoned generals into stalemates. They combined ancient strategies with modern weapons and refused to surrender without inflicting significant costs. One of the most legendary battles, at Orakau in 1864, saw Rewi Maniapoto and his people make a last stand against overwhelming British forces. Outnumbered and outgunned, they refused to surrender, famously declaring, "Ka wau hai tonu matu, ake ake ake," "We will fight on forever and ever." Today, the warrior spirit of the Maori is not buried in the past. It lives on in the chants, in the tamoko, sacred tattoos, in the haka performed before every international rugby match. It lives on in their art, their language, and their struggle for land, rights, and recognition. The Maori are no longer fighting with spears and muskets, but they are still fighting for their culture, for their future, and for the preservation of a legacy carved into the mountains of Aotearoa itself. To understand the Maori is to understand a people who do not fear death because they believe in something greater: ancestry, spirit, and the eternal bond between land and blood. They are warriors not only of war, but of identity. And in a world that often forgets its past, the Maori stand as a reminder that true power is not measured in how many enemies you defeat, but in how deeply your spirit endures through time.